As I sat in my cramped desk at school, the harsh fluorescent lights overhead flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows across the classroom. The air grew heavy with tension as the intercom came on, the principal's voice trembling as he announced the dreaded words. "Attention all students and staff, this is not a drill. We are now in lockdown." Panic rippled through the room, and I felt my heart hammering in my chest. We'd practiced lockdown drills before, but this time something was different. The windows rattled as the wind howled outside, and a deep guttural growl echoed through the hallway. My eyes darted to the teacher, who looked just as terrified as the rest of us. We huddled in silence, the fear palpable as the horrifying reality of our situation sank in. Whatever had triggered this lockdown wasn't a mere drill. It was something far more sinister, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone in that dark, ominous building. Minutes felt like hours as we waited in that eerie silence, our ears strained for any sign of what lurked beyond the classroom door. The growls persisted, punctuated by the occasional scrape and thud, as if something monstrous prowled the corridors. Beads of sweat formed on my forehead, and my palms turned clammy as my mind raced to make sense of the unimaginable. Whispers of ghost stories and urban legends we had shared in hushed tones during lunch breaks now seemed all too real, as if the darkest of nightmares had taken on corporeal form within those walls. I stole a glance at the classroom window, hoping for a glimpse of the outside world, but it only revealed a swirl of thick, impenetrable fog that obscured any hope of escape. The classroom door remained locked and barricaded, a feeble defense against the unknown horrors beyond. Tears welled up in the eyes of some of my classmates, and the stifled sobs of others filled the room with an unsettling symphony of fear. Then, a blood-curdling shriek erupted from the hallway, piercing through the despair like a knife. It was a voice I recognized, belonging to one of our fellow students. In a moment of sheer terror, I realized that our fears were not unfounded. Whatever had invaded our school was real, malevolent, and hungry for something far more sinister than our textbooks and innocence. We were trapped, helpless, and utterly at the mercy of an unspeakable nightmare. As the minutes dragged on, the darkness outside the windows deepened, and the malevolent presence drew closer. I clung to the hope that help would arrive soon. But in that moment, all I could do was wait in the suffocating darkness, praying for morning to come and for this dreadful nightmare to end. I was sitting in my usual spot, the fourth-row desk by the window, trying to stay focused on my math homework, while the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the classroom. The muffled sounds of laughter and chatter filled the air as my classmates and I labored through the final hour of the school day. Just as the bell was about to ring, the intercom crackled to life, and the principal's voice, usually calm and composed, quivered with fear as he announced, "Attention all students and staff, this is not a drill. We are now in lockdown mode." A collective gasp swept through the room as the laughter and chatter instantly gave way to anxious whispers. We'd had lockdown drills before, but this time something in the principal's voice told me that this was no ordinary practice. As our teacher rushed to lock the classroom door and dim the lights, a chilling sense of unease settled over us. Outside, the once bustling schoolyard now seemed desolate and foreboding. The minutes crawled by, and tension hung heavy in the air. It wasn't long before we heard strange, shuffling footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate, like something was stalking its prey. The classroom fell into a hushed panic, and my heart pounded so loudly that I was certain it could be heard by whatever lurked beyond the door. With each passing moment, the sounds grew closer, and dread coiled around my chest. I glanced at my classmates, their faces pale with fear, and realized that we were all trapped in this nightmare together. The scratching and scraping outside the door intensified, as if some malevolent force was toying with us, relishing our terror. In the dim light, I caught sight of a shadowy figure moving past the frosted glass window on the door, its silhouette twisted and grotesque. A stifled scream caught in my throat as I watched it linger there, as if it knew I was watching. Time seemed to stand still as we waited, trapped in our fragile sanctuary, praying for the nightmare to end. The intercom crackled again, and this time it was the principal's voice, trembling and terrified, begging us to remain silent and stay hidden. It was then that I realized that whatever was outside wasn't human. It was something otherworldly, something that defied explanation. The minutes dragged on like an eternity, and it felt as though the classroom had become a tomb, trapping us with our fears. The twisted, shadowy figure outside the door continued to torment us, its eerie presence causing shivers to run down our spines. We stayed huddled in silence, our breath shallow and quick, straining to hear any indication of what was happening beyond our barricade. Then, just as despair was beginning to settle in, the intercom crackled once more, and this time it was a different voice, a calm and reassuring one. It was the voice of Officer Ramirez, the school resource officer. He urged us to remain quiet and not open the door until further notice, assuring us that help was on the way. His words provided a flicker of hope in our hearts, and we clung to it desperately. Minutes turned into hours, and the ominous presence outside the door seemed to recede. The scratching and shuffling grew fainter, and a sense of relief washed over us. Finally, the moment came when Officer Ramirez knocked on the door and identified himself, and we cautiously unlocked it. His eyes held a mix of exhaustion and relief as he explained that there had been a wild animal loose in the school, which had triggered the lockdown. Though the fear had subsided, we couldn't help but feel a lingering unease, knowing that such a mundane explanation couldn't account for the malevolent feeling that had filled the air during those long moments. The school day ended with a sense of surreal normalcy as we were dismissed, but we couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister had been at play. In the days that followed, rumors swirled throughout the school, whispers of strange occurrences, unexplained phenomena, and the mysterious disappearance of a janitor who had been on duty that fateful afternoon. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes reality can be far stranger and more terrifying than our darkest imaginings. As time passed, the incident faded from our collective memory, but those of us who had experienced that harrowing school lockdown knew that something inexplicable had occurred that day. And while the official story remained one of a wild animal, deep down, we couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the darkness that had descended upon our school, a darkness that would continue to haunt our dreams for years to come. The monotonous drone of the history teacher's voice was beginning to lull me into a drowsy stupor when the deafening blare of the school's emergency alarm shattered the classroom's tranquility. A wave of panic swept over the students as the intercom crackled to life with a sense of urgency that sent shivers down my spine. "Attention all students and staff," the principal's voice quivered. "We are in immediate lockdown due to an intruder on campus." Dread settled in like a heavy fog as our teacher rushed to lock the door, her trembling hands betraying her fear. We huddled in silence, our hearts pounding as we realized that this was no ordinary drill. This was a nightmare come to life. Outside the classroom, the chaotic sounds of footsteps and indistinct voices grew louder, punctuated by occasional banging on nearby doors. The intruder was getting closer, and our sanctuary felt increasingly vulnerable. Time seemed to stretch as we waited, each second an agonizing eternity. Then, just as fear threatened to overwhelm us, a flicker of hope appeared in the form of distant sirens. The police have thankfully arrived quickly. The wailing of police cars drew nearer, drowning out the intruder's ominous presence. We breathed a collective sigh of relief as we heard the commotion outside our door. The authorities had arrived, and our nightmare was coming to an end. The police swiftly apprehended the intruder, a troubled former student who had somehow gained access to the school. As they led him away in handcuffs, we saw the desperation in his eyes, a haunting reminder of the darkness that could lurk in the hearts of those we thought we knew. In the aftermath, the school implemented additional security measures to prevent such an incident from happening again. We returned to our studies, but the memory of that day lingered, a chilling reminder of the fragility of our sense of safety. The bond between students and staff grew stronger as we supported one another through the trauma, and we learned to appreciate the everyday moments we often took for granted. The school lockdown had been a nightmare, but it had also been a wake-up call, a stark reminder that evil could penetrate even the most sacred of places. And as we continued our education, we carried with us the lessons of that harrowing day, knowing that we were stronger together and that, in the face of darkness, there would always be a glimmer of hope to guide us through.